Welcome back. Leaders of some of the world's biggest economies, including US President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, they've all gathered in Canada's Rockies for this year's G7 summit. This was to be Mark Carney's big moment, as it is his first international gathering as the Canadian Prime Minister. However, the Israel-Iran conflict is expected to overshadow the summit. Leaders will have to discuss ways to manage the conflict amid fears of a broader conflict in West Asia. President Starmer and Macron have called for de-escalation, while President Trump had initially praised Israel's attacks as excellent. The summit is also taking place at a time when President Trump's trade tariffs remain a big source of tension between the US and allies. Several leaders are expected to hold bilateral meetings with him. The procurement of rare earth materials amid China's export restriction and the Russia-Ukraine war may also be on the agenda of the summit. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also attending the summit at the invitation of Prime Minister Carney. Though India isn't a G7 member, it has been invited to G7 meetings since 2019. The Prime Minister may look to reset ties with Canada. The PM will discuss crucial global issues including energy security, tech and innovation with G7. Joining us now to take this discussion forward is Robert A. Rogowsky, Professor, Trade and Economic Diplomacy of Middlebury Institute of International Studies. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. Let me begin by asking you about how the Israel-Iran war is going to dominate the G7 agenda. And do you feel that the worry and all the priorities of G7 leaders is only going to be about ending this war?
Oh, I think it will be a tremendously important topic for discussion. There's no way to avoid that. It is a war. I don't think it will be the only thing to be discussed because there are many too important issues. But I do think it will be up front in a tremendously important topic because war in the Middle East has the potential to go out of control. And it is already intensely severe. These are nations attacking each other with very serious weaponry, lots of potential destruction. This is exactly the sort of thing the G7 was structured to talk about and deal with. So I do think it will be extremely important. It will not monopolize, but it will be extremely important.
Right. Professor, we've also seen the latest World Bank outlook about slowing global growth. And this is because of the tariff uncertainty, the wars that are going on. This is possibly only going to worsen things and worsen the global economic outlook. What kind of a message, economic message, would the G7 like to send in the current environment, according to you?
Well, it is, of course, also a key agenda purpose of the G7, and that is to deal with how well the world economy is moving forward. So it will also be an important topic. I think because, as you point out, much of this reduction in economic growth is attributable to, or at least has been attributed to, the trade strategy of the United States, in particular, reestablishing tariffs as a weapon. It will be a very focused discussion, and I believe the point coming out of the G7, the bottom line will be a recognition that the G6 nations, that is the 7 nations without the United States, must move forward in a collaborative, coherent way together with the idea that the United States is not a reliable ally. And I think this is manifest by a statement I saw that Prime Minister Carney is not anticipating a joint message from the G7, so that presages the idea that the G6 may have to think about themselves moving forward with an agenda, maybe even a statement that does not include the U.S.
Right. That indeed is an important point. Do you think the G6 will be able to impress upon Donald Trump to finally resolve these trade conflicts because it's not helping anyone?
I would say that is wishful thinking. And I wish for that thinking myself because I think getting the United States back on track with the rules based trading system is incredibly important. But I do think, and I'm encouraged by the idea that the G6 and a number of the countries that have been invited by Prime Minister Carney will be looking for ways to continue what they see as a very viable and important multilateral trading system, even without the United States. That's a very difficult task, but not an impossible one. And I think this G7 is likely to be the starting point, maybe the launching of a new movement to reestablish the multilateral system, even without the United States.
Important point again. Professor, how important would you describe is the presence of India at the G7? They're coming at the invitation of Mark Carney.
I think it's tremendously important. There's no way of moving forward in a strong multilateral trading system and a coordinated movement towards reestablishing more rapid world growth without India. India is just too important a nation, too important a player in the system to move forward without it. So I think it was very wise to include India in this program, as it is in every important multilateral program.
Right. The critical mineral issue and having a secured supply chain. Today, the world has seen how China, after the issue of semiconductors, by putting restrictions on rare earth magnets, is seriously threatening global automobile manufacturing. Will the G7 come out with a statement, an intent on this?
Oh, I think it has to. It is going to be hard for the G7 to come out with a statement on this, since most of this, that is the weaponization of economic tools, is the result of the aggressive strategy of the United States. It is conceivable that the G6 will come out with a coordinated statement about this and recognizing, one, that this kind of weaponization will be a Pyrrhic victory at best for anybody because the costs are so high in a system that has grown so interconnected over the last 75 years. And so being pushed to weaponize these economic tools and the supply chain links that nations have is going to, of course, create economic downfall. And this attack on China, China's use of the rare earths, is expected. It's normal. It should have been anticipated.
Right. My final question to you would be, how do you see Donald Trump and the U.S. at the negotiating table at the G7 this time? Would they be seen as a country which is stalling the G7 agenda rather than supporting it?
That's an extremely good question. It's hard to answer because the probabilities are so varied. I think that the G6 will probably be extremely diplomatic in their approaches to Donald Trump because they have seen in the past that Donald Trump can be riled, and when he is riled, he will act in a quite aggressive way. And sometimes that is reversed relatively quickly afterwards, but nonetheless, you want to keep him calm and focused on a few issues, maybe one issue, if you want to keep the United States intact in the collaboration process. So I think they'll behave remarkably diplomatically. It doesn't guarantee that he won't react to something or that he has a strategy going in to make this into a game show. But I do think that they will try their best to keep it as collaborative as possible, simply because you don't know what the reaction will be.
All right, Robert Rogowsky, thank you very much for joining us and telling us all about the G7 agenda and what we can expect over the next 2 days. Let's move on and get you